Welcome to our weapon refine analysis for Innes, Tana, and Lon'qu. These are the weapon refines released in the patch 2.10 of Fire Emblem Heroes. As I've said before, when I saw the initial preview of these weapon refines, I am generally pretty disappointed that we don't have more weapon refines, and especially those of 3 and 4 star characters. I feel like there's just so many more characters that could put in some effort, and I really don't feel like they don't have the development or the resources to not be able to give a lot of old characters weapon refines. So I'm gonna give these guys the objective analysis I've always done and my thoughts and how you can utilize these characters, but hopefully going forward, especially with like patch 3.0, they do release a lot of this stuff. First and foremost, feel free to say hello if you're on Twitch, chat below to the guys on YouTube, and of course on YouTube you can feel free to also say hello and connect the love between the two communities in the comments below. So anyways, let's get started. First of all, we're going to look at Innes, and Innes's weapon is the Nidhogg. As you can see on screen there, Nidhogg has the same effect it always did with the owl tome effect on a bow, which is pretty cool. It makes him unique, and it also makes him a really good unit to stat stack on. My opinion with colorless units is they are amazing when you stat stack them. If you actually look at some of my Niles footage, whether you've been in my stream or you've seen some of the gameplay videos, if you combine a colorless unit with Corin, Marth, Brave Lucina, visible buffs like tactic skills or huge rally pluses, you can really push a colorless unit into high 50s of every stat and higher than that. And if you can utilize something like Nidhogg, it becomes amazing. So his base effect is really good, especially if you combine it with like close counter and such. But I'm not going to strictly look at that. I think it's already a good weapon as it is, and the fact that he's colorless only does him favors. It's just really good on colors because you don't have that weakness and you don't necessarily overkill something that's like, you know, if you're blue like Niles and you hit a red, well, you know, you're gonna end up doing too much damage in a lot of situations. So, and on top of that, the bow does help against flyers. The actual special refine that Nidhogg receives is magic and dragons cannot counterattack. So this is like Jafar's special refine, except it also affects dragons, which Jafar's didn't. And that's actually a very important thing to consider, because dragons are very common, whether that's in a bunch of abyssal modes, infernals, chain challenge, tempest, they're all over the place. Okay, there's lots of them, and in arena as well, you'll run into tons of dragons. It's a very popular character type. And that makes Innes kind of more flexible, in my opinion, than Jafar when it comes to taking on more of the cast. As I'll show you with a couple of builds on the side, he's got a pretty good and clear advantage here. However, it is kind of like anti-synergy in a way. His base effect is reliant on allies being around him, and then his special refine requires him to player phase. So usually when you player phase, you don't really have your other units around you because your unit extends forward and then attacks. So you don't really utilize the stats from Nidhogg in that aspect. It's good if maybe on the enemy phase, you're in like a corner and all your allies are around you and then you attack that way. On top of that, this is like water sweep, but without having a speed check, and of course you can double. So there are some pros and cons to this. Namely, sometimes you don't want to double, and of course, you know, with Jafar, comparatively, he did chip damage and he debuffs, which is why Nidhogg isn't strictly better than Jafar's refinement, because being a dagger user that poisons the units in an AoE, including the unit itself, and debuffs everything, is still going to be kind of, in my opinion, a lot better than what Innes would be, especially if you consider something like colorless dual infantry being a thing in the future. So, one build I've shown, I'm going to start with a couple of the builds that I have ideas with Innes. If you want to retain his original anti-magic or anti-dragon kind of aspect, then I recommend using him more on enemy phase than you would on player phase, with using a special refine with a little bit of help just to be able to finish off units in that case. Maybe if I have reposition on your team, it would be a little bit better. The reason I use swap instead of something like reposition or drawback is because when you want to play with Nidhogg, you really want to utilize a unit's positioning perfectly. You just want to swap right into the middle of like 3 units rather than drawback or repositioning, throwing your formation completely out. So enemy phase, Nidhogg, surround him with allies, distant defense, fury, and of course moonbow, and you're going to be bumping up his stats into really high numbers, easily like that. He does have low defense, but again, Nidhogg helps him a lot in that case. So moving forward, we got Innes over here with more of a player phase utility rather than enemy phase. You can still kind of use him on enemy phase here, but it's not ideal. And what you want to kind of do here is if you're going to use Nidhogg on the player phase, you're going to want to make sure you utilize your allies moving forward with him and utilizing that in a way that's just going to add, maybe give him 2 extra attack or 2 extra speed should he need it. But the goal with a build like this is essentially you can attack things for free and kill them. Specifically dragons or magic enemies. So if you use auto attack wave, you use chill defense, life and death, flashing blade and glimmer, you pretty much can double things and they can't retaliate you back. So that's huge. You don't want to hit anything that has a melee or distant counter unit, but if you want them to counter specifically casters or dragons, this is a good way to do it. If you combine out attack wave, life and death, chill defense, and flashing blade with glimmer, you know, he reaches some really high attacks. This isn't considered merges as well, so it's a good, decent way to consider it. He does have enough bulk, even on enemy phase, to take on like magical units, so you could use them that way as well. But again, this is more player phase oriented and just really takes advantage of the fact that sweep denies your doubles, but this doesn't. And as I mentioned earlier, this is more arena oriented. But if you want to use him on arena, he can now use his refine in a way that supports the team. He's got decent resistance, and of course if you add wind sweep to him, you can literally attack into anything and it cannot counter attack. So you're not using close counter here as a way to enemy phase bait, but you could. And another option could be DB4 or colorless dual infantry in the future. The reason close counter is here though is because you want to not do so much damage with Death Blow 4. If you end up killing things, that's kind of bad with an arena bonus unit system. You end up, you know, taking the kills from your arena bonus unit, and close counter just a little bit more useful there. I don't expect him to be actually using that in any way, because with 46 defensive physical bulk, he's not really going to be taking much hits, and Bold Fighter will absolutely delete him. So what you're doing here is, again, just utilizing the fact that he can attack into any enemy unit type. It's pretty much like a fire sweep bow, but he doesn't double because he's got that wind sweep, and he's not doing so much damage because you've chosen to give him a plus res IV here. You could also go with like minus attack or minus defense in these cases. Like the IVs are not so important, and you bump res just because you want to use them with ploy as well. You could even use a poison strike seal, for instance, and yeah, that's pretty much a way to use support of Innes. So let's move on. This time we're going to talk about Vidofnir on Tana. So Tana's refinement, without even going with special refinement, changes her weapon to match that with barrier blade and safeguard. It doesn't affect all units though. It's only sword, lance, axe, and dragonstone. So, you know, if you're going to be taking bow users or magical damage, it's not as good, but at least it's pretty good against all melee type units in the game, and that's good enough. She's going to be really tanky, and I think that's exactly how you should utilize her, because that'll make her stand out from the other blue lance flyers. Now that we have Shigure in the game, Sumia, Cordelia, you know, there's so many good blue lance flyers already in the game that Tana does, even though she has a decent stat spread to utilize that sort of offensive power, her weapon is enemy phase based. You have to get hit for it to be utilized properly. And the positioning requirement of it means that there has to be someone nearby, and you can't necessarily play super aggressively. So what I've done, and with some of the builds I'll show off, they're primarily enemy phase based, and you can use this as a way to make your own builds as well. So first one I'll show off here is taking advantage of the fact that Vidofnir wants to have other infantries and maybe an armor nearby. Remember, she comes with guidance, so she's pretty much ready to be utilized on a mixed defense team comp. And yeah, like Vidofnir works with that well. You can pretty much prop your allies behind you, set up Tana as a frontline wall, and she's going to be able to take so much damage. So if you combine the effects of Vidofnir, giving you 7 defense, close defense giving you 6, up to 13, and then you have attack defense bond giving you an additional 5 up to 18 defense, and this isn't even accounting for a rally or anything like that. She's reaching way high defenses, plus 40 easily, no merges, no rallies, no drives, nothing. And that's crazy good. I mean, her res is still going to be respectable as well. So yeah, she's going to be a crazy wall. And if you actually consider her attack and defense as well, because of the special effect, she reaches 40 speed and 54 attack, which is still really good. So she's got really good defensive and offensive power on the enemy phase. It's just this isn't the greatest for player phase. And the reason I even have Wings of Mercy here is because mobility is king to set up those sort of situations. A similar build to previously, but potentially even more mobility options, is going to utilize the new Brazen Attack Res and Brazen Attack Defense and play with a lower HP threshold. So rather than going to your allies, like going through them with Wings of Mercy, you can choose to frontline a lot of damage with Tana and then place yourself wherever you want with Escape Route. But while you're in that range, you also have Brazen Attack Defense and Res activated at the same time, bumping her attack up to 64 with Special Refine 68. Speed is a solid 40. And you're getting like 7 defense and 7 res. So this isn't as tanky as the previous one, but it's also not as restrictive by having to be around your allies as much because of the defense bond, and you could use this again on the player phase as well because of that. The bonfire procs will be amazing, better on the previous build, but still really good here. So Tana's Refine is very respectable if you use it in this aspect, and she'll be really tanky that she could likely still survive even if she was low HP. Okay, and finally, the more or less like the arena scoring build and support build for Tana. Again, Defense IV is in my opinion the best choice because it's a super boon and she is primarily going to want to tank those sort of things. She could do Resistance IV as well, but I kind of prefer this, especially if you go for a Water Sweep, which is more budget. Not everybody has Wind Sweep. So again, Water Sweep to deny your own doubles. You only hit once, and you can use Poison Strike to whittle down your enemy target. Use this encounter for scoring, but it could also be DB4 and maybe a blue cavalry flyer skill in the future. In my opinion, this encounter is the choice to make because more and more mages will show up, and it also reduces your damage output on player phase. You don't want to necessarily kill things with DB4. So yeah, again, really amazing things. Tana, I think, is a very flexible unit now. I've shown mostly what she can do on enemy phase and a little bit of player phase, but she has the stats to really make any build worthwhile. Okay, and the final candidate for today's weapon refines, Solitary Blade. So, no introduction really needs to be made on this. It's literally just Raven's refinement. You got life and death and a cooldown reduction. The problem with this though, and I'm only going to show off one build for Lon'qu, and the reason I'm only going to show off one build for Lon'qu is because he is pretty much a red Raven. So if you know how to build Raven, and he's been around for a long time, you pretty much can apply the same sort of builds to Lon'qu. He doesn't really have that much of a difference in his sort of stat spread, with him having lower attack but more speed, like a lot more speed, and a little bit, it might be similar HP. I haven't checked it out completely, but very similar kind of stat spread that anything you apply to one applies to another. The most common and, in my opinion, the most effective build that Lon'qu and Raven both utilize is a Fury Gale Force build, utilizing Flashing Blade or Heavy Blade. In Raven's case, you can use Heavy Blade, but Lon'qu doesn't have as much attack, so it's better to use Flashing Blade on him. Overall, though, I'm kind of disappointed in this refinement, and I don't think it's as good as it could have been. It seems, in my opinion, just kind of lazy, and it doesn't really make him stand out more than he should have, unfortunately. The thing with Raven and Lon'qu comparatively, they're different colors, so you can't necessarily compare them in matchups. But the thing is, you can compare them with what competition they have in their respective infantry pools. Raven doesn't have competition. Very little. There are not that many offensive axe infantry users that are as fast and as dominant as he is. The other one is pretty much Linus, but he's merge locked, so you can't have the availability there. And like Bike is not fast enough. Bars is pretty good, but again, like he's just not, he doesn't have that preference weapon. You got Bartray, who's still not fast enough. So if you see the pattern here, there's just not that many fast axe users that are really good. That's what it is. So if you compare that to Lon'qu, unfortunately, well, Carla, Ira, Mia, Soleil, Hannah. Yeah, I just listed 5 off the top of my head. There's more. This is my point. You have more. So the infantry red pool is very competitive compared to Raven, who pretty much has it there. So I wanted to make this way more, I want to make this a little bit more clear as well. So just as one example, thanks to Alico from the Discord, he's the one who checked this out for me. A common matchup is Legendary Hector versus these red matchups, okay? We have Carla, Soleil, and Lon'qu. If you look at the bottom here, Carla wins, Soleil wins, Lon'qu loses. That's bad. Okay, that's bad. So the problem is Lon'qu doesn't have enough of attack stat or offensive power these other two units have to kill a very common green unit. That's a big problem, okay? You need to win your matchups. There's more examples of this, but essentially Lon'qu's high HP and speed are too much. They don't help him here. Carla utilizes her extra speed, and she gets that extra bonus damage. Soleil has really good attack, doesn't have as much speed, and that helps her secure those kills. To put it in a reference, you need to give Lon'qu 8 merges before he can take this Hector matchup, compared to Carla and Soleil here, who have 0 merges. So that extra speed doesn't help him in this particular case, and his attack is still not good enough, and his competition make it really hard for him to compete, unfortunately. So yeah, that's why, I'm not too impressed with Lon'qu. I think his refinement could have been a bit better. Hopefully you don't do this for future units. To put it simple, it made him a lot better than what he was, because he wasn't doing much before this, but he's not, you pretty much can just use Soleil, and you'll have an easier time than you would with Lon'qu, because Soleil could be fast enough to cover most of the meta, and Lon'qu is too fast. So if you disagree, if you want to show me some different builds in the units here that were shown today, whether that's Innes, Tana, or Lon'qu, feel free to put it in the comments below. I appreciate that. I like to read whatever you guys have to say, and it matters. I may have kept the Lon'qu thing a little bit short, but honestly speaking, you have so many other options when it comes to that pool, and feel free to let me know what you think. We have these sort of discussions all the time in the Discord, so you can check out the Discord link below. And of course, leave a comment. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe for more of this stuff. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.